guys, welcome back in the third chapter of the follow-along build of the Mosquito. In this chapter we're going to talk about painting the cockpit. In the previous chapters we talked about building the cockpit and how to handle the small parts, talk about handling milliput, the tools. If you missed out on those chapters, you can still pull those up if you click our link. Also, you will find the inbox review. If you still don't have a Mosquito and you want to buy one, you can click on our other link, which will get you to our website to pick one up. We're going to talk a little bit more about airbrushing the cockpit. But before we do that, I'd like to explain a little bit more about the essentials you will need doing that. Okay, let's talk about the most essential tool, which in this case is a good airbrush. There's a lot of talk out there about airbrushing, about airbrushes, what to buy, what not to buy. It's all based on personal opinion. So in my opinion, you really don't need a high-line airbrush. You really don't need a $700–800 airbrush. A midline will just do fine. I started out most of my career with a Badger 200. Badger 200 is a very essential, very basic airbrush. It's bottle fed, it's single action, and you have to control the needle by twisting the knob in the back. Again, these retail for under $100 and are very easy to maintain. Recently I pointed up to an Iwata HPC Plus. This is not the cheapest one, but it's definitely not the most expensive one. This is a mid-grade airbrush. It's top fed, double action, very easy to maintain, and it does a job. Another thing is, of course, of essence, is the compressor. There are a lot of good tabletop models out there. Some are, again, very expensive, some are a little cheaper. The one I use right now is the Aztec from Testers. Any compressor will work, any tabletop compressor will work. Even if you have a compressor in your garage, you can make that work too. As long as you can have between 0 and 30–40 psi, you should be fine. Don't go overboard. Just make a purchase that somewhere will fit into your budget and you'll be fine. Then there are some other essentials that you need before you start airbrushing, and make sure that they're all on your table. Make sure that your preparation is in place so you don't have to get up and look for stuff. So let's talk a little bit about those things. It's good to have a variety of brushes on hand. Another couple tools that need to be on your table is scissors, tweezers, and scalpel. You're also going to need thinner and a rag. Another nifty tool to have close is your airbrush station cleaner. This is a very nifty device. It's very simple, but it makes life a lot easier. Every time in between coats, in between layers, you have to clean or rinse your airbrush. I was spraying it all over the place, and all I was creating was an unsafe environment. This little gem will do it for you. It will contain all the spray, the overspray, the mist, the fog, and the smell. So what you do, you just put the nozzle into the hole and just pull the trigger. The paint, the thinner, will be trapped in this jar. And the good thing is, it has a filter. It comes with a couple replacement filters. Something to think about, not really expensive, but a good thing to have close. Before we start airbrushing, we have to make sure we got all our stuff lined up. Like you see here, I got a couple of photo etch parts that resembles part of the facings of the instrument panel. So either to spray paint those and making sure that they don't blow away. A little trick that we do is to stick them on masking tape, on the backside of masking tape. So let's do this. One here. Make sure they're in the right position, that you don't put them upside down. So this will make it a lot easier to gain control and not having those things flying all over the place, or you have to grab them in your fingers or your tweezers. I found out that this is the best way to handle small parts. You can do this with little plastic parts, anything that you don't want to hold or pick up with the tweezers. You can put them on either double-sided type or on a piece of masking tape like we demonstrated here. We have our paint selected. The very first thing we have to do is to apply a base coat on everything that needs to be painted in the colors of the cockpit. In this case, it's like this green. Tamiya calls it Imperial Japanese Navy cockpit green. But to me, when I compare pictures and reference material, it looked exactly what I need or what I was looking for. So I selected this. There might be some other people out there that disagree, but this will work for me. Again, check your references. Whatever makes you happy, go for it. You can paint your cockpit in several ways. I like to bring some pre-shading, so that's why it's important to cover the whole cockpit and all the sections that you separated, that you built, the subsections, like for instance the cockpit, the seats, instrument panel. I like to cover them with the base coat, which in this case I'm going to make a dark green. First, let's prepare everything for the ground color. I'm using the flat green Mk.VI from Tamiya, and I just wonder if it's dark enough, so I'm going to add a little bit of black. It doesn't have to be precise, make it a little bit darker than the original color. I'm also going to use a little bit of thinner too, just to make it. Again, I have no exact measurements, I just do it by feeling. But usually it comes out like 2/5 of paint and 3/5 of thinner. That's usually my ratio that I apply. Now, a good thing is to really double check everything again, that you're sure you didn't make any mistakes, that you didn't forget anything, because once you apply the base coat, there is no way back. Let's do this. It's not really necessary to put the lid back on. They tend to be very messy, so just out of precaution. What I did forget is a piece of little cardboard paper. I got a little box here, so it's always good to have close. The pressure I'm using at the moment is around 20 psi. 20 psi and less, between 15 and 20, that is, as far as I'm concerned, that is one of the best setting to use your airbrush. So here we go. Airbrushing is not all that difficult, especially when you do it right and you keep everything in order. It should not be a big deal. A lot of the guys there, and myself included, I still have a little bit of anxiety after all the work we put in to cover everything up with a coat of like a dark ground color or something. Still gives me the shivers until today. But let me emphasize that Tamiya paint is very, very good paint. Make sure you cover everything, hold it in different angles, so make sure you get the paint behind any details, so you got it all. And it's good to have a little bit of overspray, although you don't see it when the model is finished. Sometimes you don't even see those parts, but just to be absolutely sure, it's good to spray some areas, some extra areas, so you're not running into any problems or any surprises later on. Let's do the other half. And again, if you mix your paint and it turns out a little bit too dark, don't worry about it. You can always later put another layer over it, make it lighter. As a matter of fact, I like to work with very dark base coats, and that makes it a lot easier later on for the shadow effect, that you can add multiple layers of a lighter coat. Every coat you apply and you make it a little lighter, it will give you an extra dimension of depth in the cockpit floor. That'd be a good thing to use a tweezer somewhere so you can hold it without putting paint on your fingers, which is going to happen anyway. Alright, here we go. As I told before, there's a lot of guys out there, and again myself included, that I'm a little skittish when it comes to airbrushing. As you well know, once you put all the work in there, not much can go wrong. It can up in a disaster, but airbrush is pretty fun. At the end of it, it will definitely give you gratification. And here, make sure you got everything covered, everything that might be possibly visible. It can't hurt to spray paint that too. I mean, even if it's not visible, just to make sure. And don't worry about spraying paint on your tweezers. You can always clean that off later with some thinner, so no big deal. Like when you have a lot of detail, like for instance on the bottom where the rudder pedals are located, there's a lot of detail where it's very difficult to reach those with your airbrush unless you turn it all in different directions. It's also very important that maybe you regulate your nozzle a little bit more narrow and that you airbrush in bursts, like this kind of a deal. Actually avoid the risk of getting paint blobs on there. So far so good. This is the one that I really dread painting because I spent a lot of time applying the milliput harness and cushion, so I hope this will work out. Although the seat cushion will be painted in a different color, it can't harm to put the base color on there, the green, the dark green, so at least everything is covered in a dark green tint, so later when you apply the tan or the khaki drill, you will already have a good platform to do some shading. We'll explain that when we start really painting the cockpit. For now, the main thing is to cover everything up. The navigator seat to do, same scenario. To avoid the risk of spilling paint, I always like to fill a little bit at a time and not fill the whole thing until the top. Again, the pressure I'm using is around 15 psi, 15-20 psi. Now, there are some pieces I'm also covering with a base coat that might have to be repainted. I just want to make sure before I put the paint away that I didn't left anything out. So the worst thing that can happen is that I have to repaint it with a different color, but just want to make sure. All right. Don't be afraid to include your fingers into the process. You can always clean those afterwards. So I think I got everything covered in the base coat. I'm just gonna look everything over. Sometimes when the paint dries, you have a better view and you might have to go over a couple areas. Well, then we'll do it for the base color. The best thing is the Tamiya paint and Vallejo, both of them, but especially Tamiya, they dry pretty quick. So once you're done with the main body of the plane and you airbrush the first part, by the time you're done with the last one, the first one is already dried up and ready to receive the second coat, which is the lighter. So this will wrap it up for the base coat. In the next chapter of an online build, we'll handle the different layers of top coat together with the clear coat of varnish. So until then, stay tuned. Mk.VI here, signing off.
Ready? What are you, my mother?